They're coming. The next generation of super strong chess prodigies are hot on the heels of world champion and world number one Magnus Carlsen and all of the elite players of that generation. So I'm talking Gukesh, Alireza Firouzja, Pragg, Abdus, and this guy who I want to look at in today's video, which is Arjun. He's just won the Abu Dhabi Masters, and this game that he does to win it is really classy, just shows what phenomenal talents these young guys are. And the graphic I've got on screen here is really the rise of chess in India right now, and you can see Arjun there. He's up to world number two in India, Indian number two, sorry, just even above Gukesh now, and he's inside the world number 25. So let's have a look at this game here. It's the final round. He's playing David Anton Guerrera, and he needs to win this game to actually clinch first place outright. There was so much competition in this tournament. So let's see what he does. He kicks off with e4, and we see a Caro Khan here, and we go for this exchange variation actually, and now c4 played, the so-called Panov-Botvinnik attack. I've always known it as that. On chess.com here, it's just called the Panov attack, but I've always known it as the Panov-Botvinnik, but anyway, side point. Now, black goes knight f6 here, just to say, if you take on c4, then the bishop bounces out, and you might think, well, this looks nice for black, isolated pawn, I can play against that, but in compensation, say knight f6, well, white's going to storm these knights into the board, the bishop's got an open line, it's going to be hard to develop the king side. If you go e6, you block this bishop, development problems for black, you give white this huge initiative. I've just done a video about how to assess chess positions, the things to look for, pawn structure, initiative, etc. I'll link that one at the end if you're interested. So knight f6 played, no takes on c4, just developing pieces. Knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, symmetrical, and now pawn a6, a prophylactic move. There's a couple of minor pieces here that might want to use this square later, so it covers against that. Bishop g5 played, so immediately pressures this knight and therefore this pawn because the knight defends, so you're threatening to win a pawn here. And if you play the very natural e6, well, the challenge again is this light squared bishop. Looks really ugly. When is that one getting into the game? You've committed all these pawns on light squares. Very bad bishop. So instead of e6, we had bishop to e6. Now, there's no knight g5 at the minute, so you can sit the bishop on that square. And black actually wants to go g6, develop the bishop like that. So bishop e2 played, now g6. And now an interesting choice. Some beginners might not consider this, but chopping the knight is played, giving up the bishop pair. Now the super GMs, they love their bishops. Why would you do this? Well, now you've made this pawn also isolated here, and Arjun's really playing against this light squared bishop. If you want to go bishop g7 and have this one play in the game, well then you'd have to go f5, and then look at this one, it's just a big pawn. So these are some of the positional ideas at play. So castles was played, and now really this bishop should just come to g7 or even h6. Say Arjun decides to close the position with c5, which we see in the game, well now white actually has to spend time with queen d2, rook a d1, defending this d pawn, which could be coming under fire. Because if you carry on like we saw in the game and you get these queenside pawns going, well then black can get this g5, g4 stuff going really quick. Then f5, and the queen comes to f6, pressuring this one. It's actually dropping, you can't defend it. So a bit of a long line there, a side line, but this is basically the way black should have gone. You have to start pushing things on the king side a bit faster, get that counterplay going. But in this position here, we see bishop e7 instead, and it's all just a bit slow. So c5 now played, closing the position, very thematic when you've got knights playing against bishops. You close things down, you don't open the board. Now f5 played, pawn b4. Now if this one's taken, the rook slides, the knight drops. By the way, if you defend, well then a3. So the knight drops, then you crash through. This is good for white, pass pawn now, etc. So we didn't have that one captured. Instead, castles played. Now rook b1. Bishop f6, and this is the thing of this maneuver, it's taken 2 moves to hit the diagonal, and it blocks the queen coming out here. So now a4, g5, but b5. So in this whole line, Arjun's just so much quicker to his punch on the queen side. So this one was captured. Whoops, that's my phone pinging off. Put that on silent. This one was captured. You can now recapture with the pawn here. The computer prefers this as its main move, trying to create a passer later on maybe, or just getting a grip with b6. But instead Arjun goes with the bishop here, and now the knight actually drops away for the moment. At some point you'd be happy to give up that bishop there. Again, you're playing for a closed position, manoeuvring knights. So we had this knight dropping back. The bishop now came back to e2, opens the rook, attacks the pawn. Queen d7 is the best defense here. Bit more active because then you attack this pawn, for example. You keep this knight honest. But okay, rook a7 played. Sorry, g4 first, knight drops. Now rook a... Okay, still not rook a7, knight c6. Now this knight comes across to defend this pawn here. And now rook a7. Right, okay, so at this point the rook defends, sorry. And now Arjun goes f4, committal move, but again, very much linked in with this theme of closing the position, manoeuvring the pieces. h5 now from David. He wants to gain some space there, maybe get aggressive later. Queen d2, bishop g7, tucks back, and the bishop bounces back to b5, again looking for this exchange, and we now see it after pawn h4 takes here, and now the rook comes to this half-open e-file, and we can see the problem with these bishops, especially this light-squared one. So a really mature play by Arjun. You know, he's only 18 years old, but he's playing like he's kind of a 48-year-old. It's a final round game, and he's not playing to blow his opponent off the board, just this beautiful manoeuvring game, understanding the deep strategy of the position. So now we had bishop d7, defends this pawn, prepares to challenge the file, rook b6, now rook e8, and now king f1. These ones come off, and we see this amazing king walk now. So the queen comes over, pressures the pawn, the knight bounces in, and now I'll just play a few more moves through here. I mean, this is a long game. So the pawn's now challenged on f5, the queen covers, and this is the problem here. This bishop's just such a defensive piece. I mean, it literally can't go anywhere. So a few more moves here. The king shuffles over, comes to the queen's side, kind of Nigel Short-esque king walk, although his was into the position and he actually checkmated Jan Timman, or he was about to before Timman resigned. Now queen a8, king b2, some shuffling going on. The queen moves away, and now rook a7 comes back. And this is the thing, Arjun's just got all the pressure here. It's so tough for black to defend, burns time on the clock, and at some point we're going to see this knight swing around to e3, pressure this f5 pawn, and here it comes. So it hits this one, defends the pawn, king g7, rook b1 played, and now this is the thing. I've drawn some arrows here, and it's not to say that's necessarily the best maneuver, because you have to be careful if you leave the b file, then black could start attacking you at the right moment, or with the other battery lined up the other way, and check here, etc. But it's kind of the point that there's these little ideas in the air for white to attack these weak pawns at the right moments, land the knights, and the knights just maneuver so much better than the bishops in these kind of closed positions. So here David decides, okay, you know what, I'm giving up on this pawn, I'm going active, I'm challenging the h-file. So the pawn was snapped off with check, the bishop takes, but in compensation for giving a pawn, well, now you get super active with the queen, and you've got rid of that monstrous dark squared bishop, which was just a thorn in the black position, not a good piece. So the queen drops back, queen g2, and sure enough, this is a computer approved way to play. Black's doing okay despite being a pawn down, because you're also pressuring here. So rook e1 played, queen f2, rook e3, and now we see some shuffling going on here, and it's not so easy for white to exchange. You have to do it in the right way because of the pressure on this pawn. So queen d2, queen f1, now this one bounced to d3, and you just can't afford to change the queens in this position, because after rook captures, king g6, knight e3, the problem is this pawn. Say you defend like this, well then rook d1, we're giving the check, the pawn is dropping, trying to cover with the rook's no good, the king would have to step to the g-file anyway, so you can't change the queens there. It moves away here, rook e2, queen f1, rook d2 played, again offering the trade, the queen ducks, queen c3, just such mature kind of play, Magnus-esque squeeze going on here, queen e7, and now the knight comes to e3, wonderful outpost. We see the power of this knight versus bishop in such positions. So the queen moves away, watch out for the counterplay here, queen c2 covers, queen a5, And now here, this is the moment actually, so I wanted to pause. Now Arjun just rushes it a bit here. So technically best was rook d3, for the key reason that when black goes onto the b file looking to checkmate the king, you can cover that one with queen d2 or queen c3. And again, you don't want to be swapping those queens. Queen a6 played, and now you can pick up the pawn in better circumstances. If we come back here, the pawn's chopped immediately, but now after rook b8, well, because of all that pressure coming down the b file, now we have to give this knight for bishop. King recaptures, and really you wanted to try and keep that knight on if possible. It was such a better minor piece. So rook h2 now played, looking for some play down that h file, but now black gets active too. And despite all the pressure, this is still a level position. So a great defense from David, to his credit. So the king moves away, queen takes on d4, rook takes on h6 with check, and we see these pawns start getting swapped off. Both players have a passed pawn, plus white has the a pawn, don't forget. Rook b4 played, great move, hits here, so that one was covered. And now this is a blunder which loses the game. So white wants to get this pawn rolling, but black wants to cover with rook c4. And if you go king to d8, you're still okay here as black. You come to the side of the pawn, and there's a more important tactical reason of why king d8 is better than king f8. And we'll see that in a moment, because c6 now played, rook c4 cuts the queen, queen moves to b2, offering that trade. And now after takes here with check, we swap with the rook, queen takes, and queen a3 blocks the check, counter checks, and this was a resignation here, by the way. David just resigned, because now if you swap, this one comes back, and this pawn's actually going through. I mean, I never fully clicked through here. If you cover like this, yeah, I guess the king is just literally coming in. Yeah, this is a one king and pawn endgame. You can come like this. You're going to round this pawn up. This one's still safe. If you push this through, I haven't fully clicked this through, but yeah, okay, this is going to be a lost king and pawn endgame with the 2-on-1 here. I'll turn on the engine very briefly. So yeah, this is giving plus 55, kind of mating, whatever. Yeah, you can just start pushing these pawns, king e8, g5, let's just play it through. Click, 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 takes, you come here, but now we go g7, king gives ground. Okay, why is that not going? Oh, it's black to move, there we go. So this was how the game ended in that position way back here. Yeah, we gave the counter check, and after the counter check, this was the resignation. So really mature stuff from Arjun there. I hope you enjoyed this game. I will be covering some of the St. Louis stuff as soon as I can as well. None of the games really took my fancy yesterday. And if you want to see another video about how to assess chess positions, then click here. Thanks for watching and see you soon.